Welcome, this is Carrie Schell from On Point Quilter. For the last 6 weeks I've been drawing a collection of critters as applique motifs in Electric Quilt. And now it's time to put them in a quilt. This would be a great quilt to use a collection of applique motifs, either from your own drawings or from the EQ library. On the home screen, select Design a Block from Scratch. Select a new block, Pieced Easy Draw block. Change the block width and height to 12. Set the snaps at 24, and snapping options should be just snap to grid. Draw horizontal lines at 2 inches and 10 inches. Draw vertical lines between those two horizontal lines at 2 and 10 inches. Now draw short vertical lines at 5.5 and 6.5 inches. Also add short horizontal lines at 5.5 and 6.5 inches. Then on the inside square, draw horizontal lines at 3 and 9 inches, and then vertical lines between that at 3 and 9 inches. Now we have a 6-inch square in the center. Go to the Color tab and color this, and select Add to Project Sketchbook. Select New Block, Pieced Easy Draw, and change the block height to 6 inches. Change the snaps vertical to 12. Draw horizontal lines at 2 and 4 inches, and then at 2.5 and 3.5 inches. Go to the Color tab and color this, and select Add to Project Sketchbook. Select the Quilt worktable and select New Quilt Horizontal. In the Layout tab, change the number of blocks to 3 by 4. Change the size of the blocks to 12 by 12. Include a sashing that is 1 by 1. Do not check Include Sash Border. Go to the Border tab, select Add. Change the size to 6 inches. Select the style Spaced Squares and change the number of blocks in border to 3 horizontal and 4 vertical. Select Add and make this a 2-inch long horizontal, and then select Add, and I'm going to change the size to 0.375, make it a mitered border. Then go to the Design tab. Select Set Block and select the first block that we just drew, and with the Controller Command key select one of the large block spaces in the quilt. Select the second block, and with the Control or Command key select the second space in the spaced square border. Select the Rotate tool and click on the blocks to rotate. I decided to try to frame each of the corner blocks and then create vertical blocks in the left and right borders and horizontal blocks in the top and bottom borders. Select Fabric Tools and color the quilt. Use the Spray Can tool to quickly swap out colors in blocks. Then I like to hide show quilt patch lines to get a better visual, and select Add to Project Sketchbook. Next, select Layer 2 and go to Block Tools, Set Block. Select the Motif tab, which has all of the drawn critter motifs. Now, if you haven't drawn all the motifs, feel free to select a collection of motifs from the EQ library. I originally designed all the critter motifs at 12 inches, but for this quilt I want to use them at 6 inches. So under Quilt Worktable Options, select Setting Blocks, and under Drag and Drop Options, select the second option and change the size to 6 by 6. Now when I drag a block onto layer 2, it will be sized correctly. Select the Adjust tool and then select the block to refine the placement. The placement will be easier if under Quilt Grid Setup you make sure that the second option, which is snap block position to grid, is turned on, and the grid snap increments are set at 1 inch. Now if you move one of these motifs, the X and Y axes will be in one of those 1-inch increments. Now each of the blocks will easily be able to snap to those center spaces. Continue to use the set block to drag motifs onto layer 2 and place them in the appropriate positions using the adjust tool. When dragging motifs to a space in the spaced square border, you will find that the blocks are not actually positioned at 1-inch increments. The motifs will snap to the X axes on those left and right borders, but not to the Y axes. Use the up and down arrows on your keyboard to fine-tune the placement of the block. Once all of the motifs are placed and positioned on the quilt, turn off Hide Show Quilt Patch Lines. While this presents a better visual of the quilt, it also ended up eliminating a lot of my drawn lines in my critter motifs. So let me show you a trick to add those back. Go to layer 3 and select Set Block, select the Ladybug block and drag it on the quilt. Select the block with the Adjust tool and place it right on top of the layer 2 block. Because we had snap to block position to grid on, this placement is super easy. Now let's try this with a little bit more of a challenge block. Let's select our cat block and drag that on the quilt. With the Adjust tool, I will move that. If it doesn't quite line up, use the arrow keys on your keyboard to get everything to line up. Now this one has a little bit more of a challenge because we have layered some of our pieces, and we can see the outline of all of those layered patches. Although we can't eliminate the lines, we can make them less noticeable. Select Thread Tools and let's select a yellow thread. I like to use the style with the straight line and the weight being the lightest weight possible. Click on the outside edge of each patch that you want to change. Although the lines are still there, they are much less noticeable. Now it's not perfect because I've got this issue right here, right? I've got a gold in here. I could select maybe a darker gold and use that to do the coloring, and so it's a little bit less noticeable on both sides. You may notice that sometimes when you click on a patch to change the color, it changes a different patch instead. If that happens, select Undo and try finding a different spot on the patch to change the coloration. Now we have a much better looking cat block. I will go back and evaluate each of my blocks and decide which ones it makes sense to bring in the quilting lines. Then select Add to Project Sketchbook. Thanks so much for watching. If you would like to see how I drafted the motifs in EQ8, check out the On Point Quilter Facebook page. I have posted videos of my live events where I have drawn each of these images. For additional EQ tips and techniques, please subscribe to my weekly newsletter at www.onpointquilter.com.